We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
In that time period, my opinion of the case was that OJ Simpson had absolutely nothing to do with this crime.
Okay, now Cookie Orga is an Israeli ecstasy major figure.
Yeah, he got busted and had the biggest drug bust, or supposed smuggling empire in the United States up until that point. Somehow or another, the drug angle, which has long been reported as a possible theory in this case, could have had something to do with Joey Ippolito, or could it have had something to do with Cookie Orga? Cookie Orga might have been aware that OJ Simpson used to like going to his bar, or that Nicole Brown did. And as we proceeded through the investigation, we started to become more and more aware that we were actually staring at the guy who probably had something to do with this right in the face the entire time.
All right, we're joined again with Alex Tome. It's been a few months. Alex came in here to try to set the record straight or give multiple opinions on the whole OJ Simpson case. And technically, just 30 years ago, we're coming up on the anniversary, his case, he was acquitted. How are you doing today, Alex?
Thanks for having me, Eric. It's a pleasure to be back. I was actually really excited to come back. As you know, what we've been getting into here in the last couple of months. But yeah, the big 30th anniversary coming up, October 3rd, 1995. Not guilty, rocked everyone to their core, if I remember correctly. I was just a kid back then, but we've seen a dozen documentaries since, right?
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187.
It's funny. I was an adult at the time, and it was kind of interesting. It was like everybody was shocked. I do know that. And that probably made it more interesting overall. But a lot has happened between February and now, because when you last came on, essentially you informed me on a few things. Like, one, the individual who pushed the Jason Simpson theory actually had passed away last year, and I did not know that.
That's right. Bill Deere.
Bill Deere, that's right. So you went through and stated that that was disproven because of a time card or something, and there really was no way that Jason Simpson could do it, even though there are a lot of people out there, that's their favorite theory. You also said that Glenn Rogers did not do it. Glenn Rogers, very famously, is the serial killer who actually was executed this past May. He was executed, and his final words were, "President Trump, keep making America great. I'm ready to go." So that's
what an endorsement.
Final words. Well,
yeah.
I mean, you know what? Maybe he's trying to get one up on Gary Gilmore, who said, "Just do it," or "Let's do it," and that wound up becoming the Nike slogan of "Just do it."
Right.
So you never know.
You never know. Glenn Rogers, right? So that's another one that we touched on. Was there another theory? Oh, the Joey Ippolito theory, the Charlie theory we talked about.
Okay, yeah, the Charlie theory. I kind of wanted to put that last because we spent a lot more time on that. That was the theory that was put forth by Chris Todd, who came on, and that was essentially just saying, "Hey, the book, if I did it, is what happened." And I could see where people would go with that. It's like, well, he kind of wrote it out. Yeah, it's not like anybody can prosecute him. And the question was, is this in fact the Charlie? And you were claiming, no, it couldn't have been Charlie because he was essentially in prison at the time.
Right.
That led into your and I going back and forth with an interesting situation with
the state of Georgia.
The state of Georgia and information it releases to the public. We quite literally got two different documents.
Well, yeah. And so, Obviously, yours told a different story than mine did when showed it to everybody who watches your show. It very clearly stated that Charlie Ehrlich was in prison until September 29th, 1995. And it was an official document. I went on the Department of Georgia's, or excuse me, the Department of Corrections in Georgia on their website and just, made that request and they released it to me. And, I was like, okay, that's it. That's the end of the ball game with this one. We can move on. And then,
Right. Then somebody reached out to me via email saying, no, that's BS. And I thought, you know what? I didn't go to the Department of Corrections myself. I should
yeah.
do some due diligence. I went there and I got a different result.
Yeah. So you got one that said 1993, which puts him back in play. And at that point, I was just like, oh man, I hope he doesn't think, and all the viewers don't think that I just forged this document. And what can I do? And then I realized I'll just give you my credentials, and you can log into the website and see what I pulled. And I think you can verify that you found, in fact, exactly what I showed you.
Yes. And I actually have a clip of my doing that and I will insert it here.
Awesome. Okay, good. That really helps out. Yeah, no, I didn't have to, at the time I was like, yeah, this proves exactly what I had thought. And Charlie was incredibly vague, when we talked about it. But you know what, man, let's circle back to Glenn Rogers because I think
Mm,
this is super exciting or for anybody who really cares about this because I've never been able to get rid of him myself from being a
hmm,
potential suspect. I'd always question how, how does this guy end up knowing OJ and knowing
right.
Nicole? And, just,
And it's
I don't know.
possible. It's hard to rule out a serial killer.
Well, of course. And not that he even really needed to know them, really, if he was just as crazy as advertised. But, I got to know a defense investigator and not just any old investigator. I got to know Pat McKenna, who is famous for finding the Furman tapes. He is essentially the reason why OJ Simpson was acquitted. When he found those Furman tapes, that was the end of the ball game. It didn't really matter. Nothing else really mattered. It just so happened that the case that was presented by the prosecution was weak in many respects, and I think mainly in presentation form. But Pat McKenna, he probably like me couldn't rule out Glenn Rogers. So I guess when he found out that Glenn Rogers was going to be executed, Pat went to visit him just a couple of days before he was put down. And Glenn admitted then, within the first 30 seconds of meeting Pat, that he had just made it up, the whole thing. And that a friend of his in Atlanta, who I don't know his identity yet, but this is interesting enough for me to follow up. He places the man in Atlanta, and that this particular person um, is the one that gave Glenn the information necessary to make the story believable to begin with. So the diagram, I believe there was a diagram that Glenn drew and even included pictures of the bodies or what have you.
Mhm. And there was a
And
broken watch scenario that was his
yeah,
signature, like breaking her watch.
right. It just so happened that Nicole's watch had stopped that night. And I believe the time was 10:03. Could have been 9:57, 10:03, somewhere in there. Her watch was broken. But this detail is a very little known detail, but it did come out. So whoever it was that put Glenn up to this had some knowledge about this case, wasn't just pulling stuff out of thin air.
So
He
who
helped
was
them.
that?
We don't
That's what
know.
I'd like to.
So we don't know. I think Pat might know. Pat's a diligent note taker, and he's just diligent anyway. So I'm sure he wants to hang on to that for a minute. But in our talkings with Pat, especially about all this Joey Ippolito stuff, which we'll get to, um, he made it clear that within minutes, Glenn Rogers came clean to him, and then they spent the rest of the day. They spent the whole day together, and they spent the rest of the day just laughing their asses off about this, that, and the other, and that was it. And Glenn Rogers gets killed. So pretty wild. But yeah, Pat's not being paid by anybody. I guess this is due to his own personal curiosity, like the rest of us. But he lives in Florida, so it wasn't that much of a trip for him. And he went up there and checked it out and spent the day with Glenn, and Glenn admitted it. So, we'll try to figure out who this guy in Atlanta was that put Glenn Rogers up to it.
It'll
And
be interesting because if he had specific information, it makes you wonder: was he involved? How would he know? Like,
right,
in order to give information to set somebody up, and then you said it was in Atlanta, so the guy's in prison probably, so he might not be a nice person.
right. Listen, I don't need another door open, but don't think I won't try to walk through that one either to try to figure out what happened. There's so much, as you'll discover as we go along here, but very interesting. It feels good, to be able to say, Glenn Rogers probably did not do this crime. In our digging since we last spoke, I had learned a lot more about Glenn Rogers that implicated him more.
Oh,
Um, this is a wild one. And there's a gentleman named Alex Constantine. Okay. And he's an author. He writes, CIA related stuff, like PSYOP stuff, you
sounds
know.
familiar.
Well, he wrote a book about Joey Ippolito, and he
Okay.
wrote he wrote this book in 1995 during the criminal trial. He's the one that pointed the finger at Joey Ippolito first.
Now, can we
Um,
back up? Who is Joey Ippolito? Just so we know, for the audience.
man,
He's a mobster, I thought, but
he's like the criminal James Bond. All right, I'll just put it to you this way. The more we found out about this guy, the more fascinating he became. His story is incredible. First, he was a powerboat racer. So in the 70s, he was, a big time powerboat racer right in the infancy of that whole thing. For those that don't know, powerboat racing was extremely popular in the late 70s, or
think
even
Miami Vice.
yeah, and in the 80s as well.
Mm.
And Joey Ippolito was a pioneer in that. He was considered one of the best. He was a rookie of the year one year, and he was sponsored by Anheuser-Busch, Bernie Little. So he had some big bucks behind him. And this is where Joey starts uncovering ways to bring in drugs into this country illegally using the powerboats. Okay. So he becomes a big time drug smuggler, both cocaine and marijuana. And Joey Ippolito had he had a great big personality and was able to work his way into circles that most people would never be able to based off of his charm. He's a ladies' man, and he was the guy's guy. Everybody wanted to hang out with Joey. He opened up a restaurant in Los Angeles, and everyone came there not for the food, but to rub elbows with him. He would party
So he
with
was in Florida or California? You said he
he's
opened a restaurant in Los Angeles.
he started off in Florida. Well, he's from New Jersey, okay, but then he moved to Miami, and from there worked his way to LA when Miami became target number one of law enforcement. If you'll remember, to the 80s, they targeted Miami as being the major hub for drugs and everything crazy, and they were right. Think Scarface. For
Oh,
those that
there's a whole movie on that showing the wars that were down there. It
the
was
Cocaine Cowboys.
cocaine. That's it. Cocaine
Yeah, so
Cowboys.
so
Insane time.
Joey was working with those people.
Okay.
So he wasn't, as advertised, there's never been a full feature movie about him or anything like that, but he was definitely a player, according to reports, the maybe number 2 or number 3 biggest smuggler in the United States at the time. And, he became friends with Al Cowlings. And Al Cowlings and him shared a relationship. And that relationship consisted of Al Cowlings, doing a lot of gopher work for him.
Now, Al
So
Cowlings, for the audience, is OJ Simpson's best friend and was also the driver in the world's slowest
the Bronco
police chase,
chase,
if I
yeah,
recall.
right, right. On June 17th, 1994, the world knew who Al Cowlings was, but who Al Cowlings really was an NFL player alongside OJ Simpson, going all the way back to his childhood. They were buddies. OJ once dated and actually married Al Cowlings' ex-girlfriend Marguerite, and had 2 kids, Jason being one of them, Arnell being the other. And so him and Al Cowlings were really tight. and so were Al Cowlings and Joey Ippolito. And ipso facto, OJ became friends with Joey as well, and the three of them, were buddies. That's the best way that I can put it, as far as I know. But Joey also had a lot of these similar relationships with other celebrities. I believe Sylvester Stallone was one of them, briefly. And
Now, were these actual friendships, or was he supplying them with
oh,
um, party materials?
I think so. Obviously, I wasn't in the bathroom when when they exchanged drugs for money, but I would suspect that at the time it kind of stands to reason that Joey was providing celebrities with cocaine and marijuana. And in fact, when we started dealing with the FBI and the DEA following up on the Joey Ippolito stuff, they confirmed within seconds that Joey Ippolito was absolutely selling OJ Simpson and Nicole Brown and Al Cowlings cocaine at one point. In fact, I think Al was actually working for Joey with something to do with, that endeavor, so to speak.
Okay, fair enough. And by the way, all this is allegedly.
Oh,
Just
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah. Make sure you flash it on the bottom of the screen. Um, again, most of this stuff, we went extremely far in our investigation. My partner in this is Michael Entile, and he's from New Jersey. And due to pure happenstance, because of people that he's related to who grew up, in the same vicinity as Joey Ippolito and the Ippolito family, we were able to make some connections um, that most people would never be able to make. And because of that, we could expand upon the story outside of the fact that we inevitably did meet Louis Ippolito and Sammy Ippolito, etc., and all the girlfriends. So, we worked diligently to follow up on every possibility. Was Joey Ippolito in Los Angeles at the time? Is there any report? All of these questions get answered in this exhaustive investigation that we've been doing, that's taken us from New York to Miami to all over the place, Las Vegas, everywhere.
now,
Um,
last we talked, just so I don't lose track of what's going on here. There was a tie to Heidi Fleiss and a gentleman named Jacob Cookie Orgad, who may have been on the site when all this went down. Is this still the case?
I don't, I've veered from that. Where that came from initially, it led me to start talking to Heidi Fleiss and become very friendly with Heidi, was the fact that I had received a random telephone call one day. I had gotten a phone call at my girlfriend's apartment, and we were just hanging out, and my cell phone rang, and it was a no caller ID number. And the person on the other end of the call proceeded to tell me this story about seeing me commenting on different forums for years, and that I was close. Um, and then they name dropped Cookie. And that was the first time I'd ever heard Cookie's name. And that was a strange day, Eric, as an aside, because I continued to get no caller ID phone calls throughout the rest of the day. And one of them came from OJ Simpson's manager, and the other one came inevitably from Charlie Ehrlich. And that was the very first time that I had ever spoken to him on the phone. So it was a strange day because I kept getting, three or four calls from no
How
caller
long
ID
ago was
numbers.
this?
January, or I think maybe December of 2022.
Okay. Okay.
That's
Now,
that's what started the whole thing. Was like, why are they? Who's calling me? Like what is this?
and
Who's
why are they calling you? I mean, what put you on the scene? I know you reached out to me because I've interviewed different people, but
right?
how did you get involved in all this? So what is the your path in?
Just been interested in it. The only way that anybody would know that I have any opinion or anything would be to have tracked my commenting on different forums.
Mhm.
Usenet Google Groups now owns the old Usenet archive. So back in the 2000s, early to mid 2000s, I used to post there, and I would use my
Mm.
name. I would just use my name. And then I also, did the same thing on YouTube and, other various places on the internet for a long time. And, and in that time period, my opinion of the case was that OJ Simpson had absolutely nothing to do with this crime. So I wasn't exactly speaking from the majority's point of view. And so whoever this person was, and hell, it could have been, a plant. It could have been somebody that wanted me to start reporting on something else, or had heard that, to speculate on that kind of a motivation on someone else, a stranger who I've never
Mhm.
spoken to since that I know of, is kind of a time wasting endeavor, if I should say. I just let it go, and I was like, wow, that was fucking weird.
Mhm.
And I wrote about it. I'm writing a book about this stuff now, in conjunction with the documentary that we're making. So it made for an interesting read. So I'm glad that it happened. Um, but yeah, that was a strange day. And so the Cookie Orgad stuff, we had set out to just try to prove that Joey Ippolito and Cookie Orgad knew each other.
Okay, now Cookie Orgad is an Israeli ecstasy
Smuggler.
major figure.
Yeah, he got busted and had the biggest drug bust, or supposed smuggling empire in the United States up until that point. And he dealt with a lot of people who were dealing at the time. I think Sammy the Bull was one of them.
Well, I was going to say, very interestingly, I know Sean Atwood,
Yeah, him too.
who was a major dealer in southern Arizona. Sammy the Bull moved into the territory because of his son, from what I understand. So it was Sammy's kind of backing his son's play, from what I understand, but they drove Sean out. Sean got locked up and he was deported. He lives in England now.
Yeah.
So is this all at the same time that
Yeah,
these are
this is all at the same time within a year or so in either direction. And
okay?
so I was like, is there a chance that, somehow or another, the drug angle, which has long been reported as a possible theory in this case, could have had something to do with Joey Ippolito, or could it have had something to do with Cookie Orgad? And so then I was like, well, maybe the two of them knew each other. Maybe the two of them worked together. Maybe there was something going on there. And we made some ties, James Caan being one of them, Heidi Fleiss being the other. So Joey knew Heidi, and Cookie used to work for Heidi, and they were friends for many years. And James Caan, was really close with Joey. In fact, he put his house up as collateral to get Joey on bond. So I know I found this a couple of instances where James Caan was in a location where Joey Ippolito either may have been at the same time as Cookie or within hours, of him being there. So I started to like, okay, maybe there is something to it. You know, Joey Ippolito used to party hardy. I mean, he was, all over the town. And Cookie Orgad inevitably became the owner of Bar One. And Bar One used to be managed by the company that, manages the Mezzalunas. So Keith Slomzowicz, and also Ron Hardy, who was Nicole Brown's neighbor. So I started trying to tie this all together, right? And it's fascinating because as confident I am that there is a circle amongst these people that everyone's in, I can't necessarily say without doubt that all of them were buddies, or that there might have been some motive there to kill Nicole and Ron.
Well, the other problem too is, and that's why I asked earlier, if you're talking about people who are dealers, they're not necessarily a friend.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But even more so than a dealer, Cookie was, he owned a nightclub. Now all of them would go there, right? In fact, we have someone who came forward during our investigation to tell us that they saw OJ and Nicole Brown at Bar One at the time that Cookie owned it.
But was it a popular location?
Yeah, yeah,
So
it was.
everybody was at bar one technically, and you
Well,
could
not
probably put them.
everybody, because in LA they don't just let anybody in. So you've got to have some pull and some swag, and there are
Fair enough.
VIPs that constantly get the star treatment in these places. I still think, even to this day, there's a line outside the door, and then there are the guys that can just walk right in. I would
Right,
suspect.
but a big A-lister or a big name could walk right in. I mean, if so, they're not going to tell Sylvester Stallone, "Hey, you need to weigh out there, buddy."
Well, that's right. I think that's exactly my point. Is that at least they're aware. Cookie Orgad might have been aware that OJ Simpson used to like going to his bar, or that Nicole Brown did, or what have you, and that plus the dealing, and the mutual friends potentially leads to a situation where they're friends too, or have some sort of an association, or in this case, some sort of a future motive for them to have been killed by someone other than OJ. Okay, so but anyway, it became a thing where we just going around in circles on this thing. And as we proceeded through the investigation, we started to become more and more aware that we were actually staring at the guy who probably had something to do with this right in the face the entire time, and that's Joey Ippolito. And we can get to why. I can give you some stuff. Obviously, as you know, we're making this documentary. So, I do want to save some of the stuff, so that everyone doesn't get disappointed just, watching a trailer or what have you. But it's exhaustive. And there is just tons and tons of information that we uncovered thanks to these relationships.
Okay, fair enough. And on that note, you have literally a trailer.
Where are you searching for the killers? What proof do you have? It's overwhelming that he absolutely did it. It's just a question of whether he had help or not.
The handling of this crime scene is a disgrace.
There were hair and fibers that didn't belong to me anywhere. There was blood in the Bronco.
They're dragging the bodies back and forth. There was an unidentified Caucasian hair.
There were blood supposedly collected that had EDTA in it.
2 different types of wounds.
The medical examiner admits that 2 weapons could have been used.
2 knives were used. Two knives, 2 different people.
A clear inference that there may be more than one killer.
OJ Simpson's oldest and closest friend is A.C. Cowlings. From the days of childhood, pro football together, and now this.
Things look pretty incriminating toward him, what's going on. Look at the black gloves that they found on his lawn. And A.C. said, I just hope those aren't the gloves that I'd loaned him about a month prior to the murders.
Look, I'm not suggesting to you that OJ Simpson didn't have somebody else there. I think it's completely plausible somebody else is there.
Joseph Ippolito, a man state and federal authorities say has long-time ties to the Mafia.
My brother told me exactly what had happened that night.
All I know is, he came back and he looked like he was beat up that night. He just didn't look the same. He looked like he had a scratch on his face and on his neck.
When they do the fingernail scrapings, they come up on the EAP system with a B. That is not O.J. Simpson's type. That is not Nicole Brown Simpson's type. That is not Mr. Goldman's type. It is some other person.
If you had a hot girl, go bring her to me and get $1,000. Everybody knew it, and that's how it was.
AC beat the kid brutally and killed him. They both walked away from it, and that was it.
You were buddies with Nicole for a little while, and then there was some sort of falling out.
Joey said that. Joey's full of shit.
He looked like, he'd seen a ghost or something. I don't know. He just looked different.
If Tom Lang would have taken the stand and testified about what he saw that night, I really, truly believe the verdict of the case would have been different.
In the book, the hypothetical is
Charlie.
Charlie.
It wasn't about the money. I was doing for the favor, as I normally do.
They basically said to me that Charlie's the accomplice, period, right away. He's a witness. He was there. He read the evidence. He read the shoes, the knives, the clothes. Okay, and he told me that for 2 fucking years.
This is the greatest story of them all.
Two people got killed violently. Almost cut her head off.
And I'm mad today when I think about it, yes.
He's dragging me here, dragging me there, I'm like, I'm gonna be an accomplice to this here, because I'm right next to you.
But this is a good segue, actually, and we can circle back to Ippolito. I mean, a lot just got dropped right there in that trailer, but I don't want to leave the subject of Charlie and Chris Todd and Eric Labe. Okay, because when I had Chris Todd on, he discussed the whole scenario of Charlie being the accomplice. And a lot of this information was from a screenplay that was written by Eric Labe that I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, somehow Chris Todd got a hold of this screenplay, and I think he gave it to the New Miami Times.
Yes. Okay.
And
That's
then
you're right on
Charlie
the
Ehrlich sued the New Miami Times and Eric Labe.
No, just the Miami New Times.
Oh, Miami New Times. Okay. And by the way, the Miami New Times, I've come to find out, owns LA Weekly. So if people are going, why in the hell is it Miami? Well, it probably is tied in with the LA Weekly.
It is.
And that's where it was going.
Yeah, it was originally probably going to LA Weekly, and then Miami New Times picked up the story. Bob Norman, who wrote the article. Yeah, exactly what you said. Charlie, sometime in 2015, had made a deal with a gentleman named Eric Labe, who is a Hollywood producer, who's worked on some projects, some decent ones too. As I can remember, something with Andy Warhol, but after the fact, possibly whatever the word is, I mean, after he died. But the point is that Charlie was in a different financial situation at the time, wanted to write a book about his life. Charlie's a really interesting character. Aside from being the head of marketing and promotions at Dean's Gold, his story going back to
And what is
New
Dean's
York.
Gold?
Dean's Gold is a gentleman's club in Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. Yeah, what a life this guy has. But yeah, and we went to visit him there. Okay, so like we actually went there to see Charlie, and I remember the day that we got there to see Charlie, which was well planned in advance. That Charlie was a bit hesitant to do this interview. Okay, so we had to kind of, it wasn't like he put it off a day, then he put it off another day, and then finally I just got the boys and our big, SUV filled up with camera equipment and lighting and everything else, and we went to the club and we dumped everything right at the front door of the club before it opened, and we just sat there and waited. And when the owner, I guess the owner or whoever was in charge of opening the place that night came by, they were like, "What is all this?" And we were like, "Well, we're here to film Charlie." And he's like, "I didn't know anything about no filming, let me call Charlie." And so he calls Charlie, and then all of a sudden Charlie shows up. Because I guess, he's not necessarily, I think he's the boss. He pretty much runs the joint. Okay. But I think there's, they have their own little structure as, managers.
Well, they may not like camera equipment sitting around outside of a strip club. I'm sure that the owner is kind of saying, I don't know what you're doing with these guys, but I want those cameras out of there.
Right. Well, he ended up being a really nice guy, and they closed off half the club. So we got to go into there and sit down with Charlie to talk about this stuff for the very first time ever. And Charlie was awesome. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. He was a really nice guy. You want to hear the crazy stories, so I could see why he wanted to have this book written about his life. But it just so happened that the book came back as a screenplay instead of a book. And it just so happens that some of the stories that Charlie told, allegedly, were taken to Venus and back, quote unquote, before they made it into the screenplay. And one of those stories is the story of June 12th, 1994, which, in If I Did It, paints the picture that Charlie is the accomplice, which is
so it was referring to the same guy.
Yes, there's no doubt about it that Charlie in If I Did It refers to Charlie Ehrlich.
And Charlie Ehrlich, just so people understand, was an accomplice of OJ Simpson in the Las Vegas incident.
And that's correct. In 2007, Charlie Ehrlich was invited to the Scotto wedding in Las Vegas, a last-minute trip. He made the trip. While he was there, OJ asked him to go to a hotel room to pretend to be a buyer of some memorabilia and to come back and report to him what he had, what the dealers had. And that turned into an armed robbery and kidnapping. And it's a crazy story all on its own that has legs. And in fact, we have this little clip, I believe, of a Charlie talking about Eric Labe and that whole situation, if you wanted to roll that.
Because Eric Labe is a con artist, and he's a good talker, and he's just a good bullshitter. That's what he does.
And I knew no one had this guy.
Oh my, you won't believe me who just texted me. Who? Eric Labe. His must be, look at this, I gotta see what it is. This is
live.
Look, read it.
We're live right now in St.
Who is this guy with him?
Okay, on the left there is Joey Spitaleri, and Joey Spitaleri is a guy who ran a company in South Florida that used to sell vacation rentals. Okay. And at the time that Charlie Ehrlich was released from prison in 1993, he had to stay in the state of Georgia, which he was working in the state of Georgia for his stepfather. And they started to have kind of a rift between them, and so Charlie needed to move. So he put in for a transfer to the state of Florida to go work for him. Joey Spitaleri was the owner of the company, and on June 13th, 1994, in the morning, Charlie reported to work and worked an entire day. So
I see. So this is his alibi.
Yeah, it's so facto he becomes his alibi as far as...
So just so everybody understands, because we're kind of all over the place in the interview, we were talking about the documents coming up. The one that Alex received showed that Charlie was in prison. The one I received showed that, no, he was actually out of prison. It turns out he was out of prison, but he was working that day, and this is his alibi stating that he was working that day.
Nah, he's not going to say it right here. We're going to cover that in another video. This is Charlie talking about the Eric Labe situation.
I understand that, but I just wanted to clarify who that was.
We filmed Joey Spitaleri talking about being his alibi separately.
Okay.
And it's just great because, as you'll see in this interview, as we're talking about all of this, Eric just so happens to text Charlie.
Put it this way. My brother Alan hooked him up with Allen Iverson, Shaquille O'Neal, and probably a half a dozen other people, and he made my stepbrother look like a fucking idiot, because he is an idiot, because he was buying into this guy Eric Labe's bullshit, and he's just a con artist. And that's what he does. He doesn't make sense. He should see a good mental doctor, okay? I will refer him, okay? I'll help him out.
Truthfully.
He's a fucking yo-yo. Mikey, what are the chances of this guy at this time who wrote the script about me, who caused me, do you know what this guy did? Everything we talked about, he went to Venus with it. The story was shelved. He had no right putting it out there. There's no way in the world that this is gonna go in print. I said, our relationship is null and void. Don't call me no more, don't speak to me anymore, you're a scumbag. He had the licensing for the book, but he couldn't go into print with it. So in the meantime, unto my knowledge, he's going around trying to job it out.
They basically said to me that Charlie's the accomplice, period. Right away. He's a witness. He was there. He read the evidence. He read the shoes, the knives, the clothes. Okay, and he told me that for 2 fucking years.
Now, the individual you hear right there is Chris Todd, and you can hear his version in the link above.
I said, this marriage is over.
He also threatened to release the quote-unquote Charlie Ehrlich confession tapes, just to kind of get in the way of our production.
He cannot. He cannot. He cannot. He will be sued, not only through me, but he'll get sued through the state of Florida.
I would do something about it in a heartbeat. And all I have to do is make 1 or 2 phone calls. I still have people that believe in me. Sometimes it's not worth it. Why would I jeopardize my life? But when I see things happening like this to you, to Charlie, who I love, I mean, he's just a dear friend. And you guys have become good friends of mine. I just hate to stand by and see something like this happen. And I know you would never say, hey, go do it. But you never know.
Who is this again?
This is Louis Ippolito.
I was thinking, okay.
It's a soldier in the Del Cavalcanti crime family.
All right.
Wow.
So we got a lot going on there. Now, ultimately, again, since we last talked, because we did discuss Charlie and you were communicating with Charlie, I was trying to see if I could get an interview with Charlie. He was not interested, from what I understand. But the case has come to a conclusion, and essentially it was settled.
Correct. Charlie received an undisclosed amount out of court, and the matter has been dropped. So I guess the public can kind of take that for what it is. Charlie said he was hell-bent. He was going to bring in Joey Spitaleri and a bunch of others. As you saw in the news, they tried to subpoena Mark Furman, Marsha Clark, Chris Darden. And that's because Charlie Ehrlich came up in no investigation whatsoever. None. In no cops investigation. And believe me, I know. I've actually talked to them. And I talk to them to this day, Detective Tom Lang being one of them.
Now, one of the issues I think you argued last time, and did you confirm it? Because we got the dates wrong, obviously, on the parole.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you stated that Charlie did not, in fact, meet OJ Simpson until 97 or a couple of years after the incident is when they met.
2000.
2000. Okay.
That's right.
And is that true still?
That is true. And they met at a party hosted by none other than Joey Ippolito.
Ah.
So in our talks with Charlie during this time, Charlie basically hinted at the fact that maybe If I Did It was written about somebody else, and that his role was interchanged with someone else's. And that person, by the way, is Joey Ippolito, who happened to die just right before If I Did It came out, which I don't think is a coincidence. And when I pressed Charlie about it, he said in no uncertain terms that absolutely this could have happened in Joey Ippolito's world, and that I should go talk to none other than Louis. So then we met Louis. And from there, what he said to us on camera with no hesitation whatsoever, no prompt. This was all shot live, as you'll see in the picture. He just came right out and said what you just saw bits and pieces of in the last two trailers, and a bunch of other stuff about Joey, including his escape from prison, what he did while he was in prison, which was, help the FBI and the DEA with stuff that's as far out there as the World Trade Center bomber.
So Joey Ippolito was a snitch, is what you're saying, or an
Yeah,
informant.
he became an informant. The question is when. We don't know. He got busted in 1992 trafficking cocaine in LA, and when they came to arrest him, he left. He escaped capture on that particular day, and in his home at the time that the cops came to get him was Al Cowlings sitting right there in the living room. And eventually, Ippolito was picked up in Dallas, Texas. All right. And then he went to, he went to New Jersey, where he had his bond. And they forced him to stay there in Jersey for however long it took before he went on trial back in Los Angeles. He was inevitably convicted, and he got a prison sentence of 10 years. And he had to turn himself into prison. And I believe he allegedly chose to go to prison in Pensacola. And while he was in prison in Pensacola on May 6th, 1994, 5 weeks before the murders out in at Bundy, Joey Ippolito escaped prison by jumping over a fence, catching a limousine, and meeting his brother, who would inevitably pick him up and take him as far north as New Jersey, as south as Dallas, Texas, and as far west as Los Angeles. And so then the real story begins.
Okay, you mentioned that the If I Did It came out like right after he died.
Correct.
Or now, why didn't Pablo Finaviz just say Joey?
I don't know. I think OJ picked Charlie's name. Maybe the two of them had a chat, and said, "Hey, you might be able to capitalize on this later." We don't know. And obviously Charlie tried to, because of the script with Eric Labe. So maybe that was the move.
I'm just trying to figure this out on timing. Since the book was published right after he died, it probably was already through the editing at that point. And maybe if Joey Ippolito was still alive, you don't dare use his name in a book.
Correct. It's exactly what I'm thinking.
Okay.
That's exactly what I'm thinking. And I think that Charlie was an easy, in fact, the story, that comes from Charlie is that he's out to dinner with OJ, Yale Galanter, his attorney at the time, and OJ's girlfriend, Chrissy Prody. And Charlie's there with his girlfriend, Rachel, at the time. And OJ just casually mentions to him, "Oh yeah, I'm working on this book, and it's supposed to be this hypothetical thing." And was like, "I might have told you. I don't know if I told you. I don't know if I did or not. But either way, I used your name. So you are going to be the hypothetical accomplice in this book." And Charlie's like, "Why the hell would you do that?" And I don't think Charlie thought much of it. I don't think that he thought it would be a big deal. But as we all know now, 25 years later, there's like 100 podcasts that point to him as the accomplice, thanks to our buddy Chris Todd. And originally,
well, with good reason, and thanks to OJ. I mean, break it down. Thanks to OJ, they pointed to him.
Well, I think, I guess ultimately you could blame OJ for choosing the name Charlie, but he only uses Charlie. He doesn't say Charlie Ehrlich.
No, he doesn't.
Right. It's only later. It's only later that it becomes evident that it might be Charlie Ehrlich because of the Vegas robbery thing, and then also because Charlie, started to work on this production with Eric Labe. And I think Charlie says to us in no uncertain terms that after he saw what it was going to look like, the words on the paper, that he called it perverted, and he didn't want anything to do with it. And so he called a halt to it, but that didn't do it. Eric still tried to shop it. He tried to shop it with the help of Chris Todd. And because of that relationship, that script ended up in Chris Todd's hands. And Chris Todd ended up trying to get it published because he is, quote unquote, a whistleblower. So he leaked it to the press.
Now, okay, I want to cover that. So when you say, and I believe he has some testimony on that, was he whistleblowing that Charlie did it? Or what was going on? I mean, I want to be fair as possible. I think that Chris Todd thought that Charlie actually did this.
I do too.
And so that would be responsible of him to say, look, you've got this guy running around who is guilty of this crime. It would be a responsible thing to do, right? To leak it to the press or put it out there.
Well, depends. Did Chris have an agreement with Eric? And I think the first and foremost thing to do would be to honor the agreement that you made with the guy, right?
Well, question: what would the agreement be? And again, that's a financial consideration.
Well, I know
if you're saying it's a murderer, if you really in your heart think that this is a murderer, then a financial agreement's kind of out the window. You've got a murderer here, so that it's kind of a bigger deal.
When we give this a little context, I think you might change your mind. I think that Eric cut Chris out. So he had no intention of continuing a relationship with Chris Todd on this project whatsoever. And at no point did Chris contribute anything to the project other than making an introduction between producers and Eric Labe. I think that was the way that Chris Todd was going to work himself into this over the long term. But when it became apparent that that relationship was not going to happen, Chris went completely maniacal with it and just continued to pursue the story. Now, he never read the entire script. He never talked to Charlie. He never, bothered to check up on some of the stuff that we've talked about so far on this thing. And that was to his detriment, obviously. Because I think if he would have continued down the path, he might have, with some tact, by the way, he would have been able to get a little further than he did. And he got really far as pointing to Charlie Ehrlich. You know, I don't know how many interviews he did, but I think it's become part of the lexicon in true crime that Charlie Ehrlich was named as a possible accomplice by now. You know, so it's nothing new. But he just doesn't come up ever. Joey Ippolito, on the other hand, comes up all the time. It was on everybody's radar. So Chris Darden, you know, he is totally aware who Joey Ippolito was. Pat McKenna, the investigator we referenced earlier, went to another investigator on the case at the time. His name was John McNally. He was later dropped or quit or something, but he was investigator number one. Pat was lower on the totem pole. And Pat had some information about Joey Ippolito, and he brought it forth to the team. And John McNally had a really close relationship with the five families, the godfathers of the five families. So he said, I'm going to go to the five families, to the godfathers, and run this past them and see what they say. They would know. And so he goes to them and asks about Joey Ippolito. And apparently the godfathers tell John McNally that Joey Ippolito had nothing to do with it. And so then John McNally goes back to Pat McKenna and says, hey, I ran that thing past the five families. They said Joey Ippolito's not the guy, drop it. And that was the end of the ball game. They didn't do anything else with Joey Ippolito on an investigative standpoint ever again. And I just venture to guess that if your guy did it, you're not going to brag about it. So if I'm one of the godfathers, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, our cash cow, Joey Ippolito, smuggling in millions and millions of dollars worth of drugs, is the guy who helped OJ Simpson pull off these murders. Go ahead.
Well, also, and you know, this is pure speculation on my part, but there is sort of a code that if in the organized crime, if they kill each other, they're soldiers. They're all on the field. There's understanding. Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman weren't soldiers on the field. They were civilians. And killing civilians is not a good thing for a crime family last time I checked.
No, it's not a good thing at all. It brings unnecessary heat. I should point out that Joey Ippolito was not a made member of any one family, but he worked with many of them. Joey Ippolito's god was money. He was just trying, whatever could pay him the most, that's who he was in allegiance with. So whether it was the Lucchese's, the Del Cavalcantis, the Gambinos, whoever brought in the most money, that's who he worked with. He worked with the Colombian cartels, the Mexican cartels, all over this country. Joey Ippolito was smuggling in drugs. And for better, I mean, you know, I'm not even here to judge how the man made his money or made his living. And I'm also not saying, and I think it's important to note, that I don't think that Joey Ippolito was wielding the knife that night. I don't think that Joey killed anybody that night necessarily. But
so let's go to that. What happened that night?
So here's what we can gather. All right. Aside from being a smuggler, Joey Ippolito was the kind of guy who would rob you. And I'm going to point to a couple of different cases here. All right. He robbed famous music producer Scott Storch. Okay. So Scott Storch, huge in the hip hop industry. All right. Living in Miami at the time. So was Joey Ippolito. And apparently Scott had a bunch of Rolexes and expensive watches in his house. Joey Ippolito made friends with Scott by stealing some other guy's jet skis and giving it to Scott. I guess that was his way of romancing the guy or what, I don't know. But he used stolen material to make a friendship with Scott Storch, and it worked. And I guess after casing the joint and seeing where everything was, Joey saw that there were some watches that were extremely expensive and determined that it was probably an easy mark, and then had goons come in and steal the watches. All right. So he robbed Scott Storch. Now, he robbed the 2 jet skis from his best friend, Eddie Trotta, amongst other things over the years that they knew each other. He robbed Heidi Fleiss of $25,000. All right. So he just robbed her of $25,000 in cash and never saw her again. And Heidi claims he never paid her back or anything, but it was a small price to pay to get Joey the hell out of her house, according to her. She said Joey was the kind of guy, he's just a pain in the ass, you know, and so is everyone. Everyone that we've talked to said that Joey, you know, he had that side of him where if you ignored him, you regretted it. Joey wasn't going to leave you alone. So if he called you to hang out, you better go hang out, because if not, he wasn't going to stop calling you for the next couple of weeks until until you address the situation with him. So Joey robbed a bunch of people. We start thinking, what happened in Vegas? Okay, so I'm like, oh man. So OJ puts together a posse to rob his own shit. So I'm thinking maybe on the night of the murders, he was snubbed by Nicole earlier that night and maybe wanted to get even with her and put Joey up to casing the joint. All right, with or without AC, we don't know. And then he's seen. So Joey Ippolito, we believe, is seen by two witnesses. One of them is Thomas Tallarino, who at 9 o'clock at night, the night of the murders, is rollerblading by Nicole Bundy condo, the Bundy condo. And as he's rollerblading by her house, he looks over to his right and he sees what he describes as an Italian guy crouching and hiding in her bushes. Okay, this is 9 o'clock. He continues rollerblading down the road, and he's like, "That's weird." And of course, it becomes relevant later because the murders are discovered, and then he realizes he saw someone there that wasn't OJ Simpson. He did not want to come forward. So Thomas Tallarino inevitably was found by LAPD, and LAPD questioned him on what he saw, and more specifically, Detective Tom Lang, who's everybody who knows this case has seen Tom Lang at some point, the detective. So an hour later, okay, Tom Lang, the neighbor, Nicole's neighbor, happens to be walking his dog. And as he approaches the corner of Dorothy and Bundy, all right, he notices a white Ford with the headlights on, glaring down the road, and it's blocking his view. And the reason why that's important is because he's walking his dog unleashed. So he wants to make sure that the dog isn't going to, get hit by a car, or that he isn't going to get hit by a car. It's 10 o'clock at night. So he can't see. So as the dog starts to cross the street, he starts gunning for a tree. And it just so happens that when he looks up, he sees Nicole Brown in a black dress, the dress that she was found murdered in, leaning into that white Ford, arguing and yelling at someone in the passenger seat. And he's clear on that because he says he sees movement from the passenger seat. So he whistles for his dog, and when he does, Nicole turns around and looks Tom Lang right in the eye. They make eye contact. Okay, this is cool. So then the dog comes back because he's a very well-trained dog, and they continue south out of sight down towards Gretna Green on Dorothy. And as he's about to cross onto Gretna Green, he turns around and sees that same white Ford is now turning into the alleyway behind Nicole Brown's condo. Now, what he also describes is while the two were arguing, or whoever's in the Bronco and Nicole Brown were arguing on Bundy, that behind Nicole, about 5 to 10 feet, is a man wearing all dark clothing with his fists clenched, inching towards Nicole Brown and the Bronco. And he describes him as being either a Mexican guy or an Italian guy or a white guy. Okay? But for us, ears perk up when we hear...
So the key thing, just not black.
Right. Not OJ, essentially. So it's another guy.
Or
so now,
Al.
Or, you're right. And he at no point said that he saw Al or OJ because he couldn't see who was inside the Bronco.
Mm-hmm.
But he was very clear that he saw movement coming from the passenger side of the vehicle. Okay? Which... the inference would be that there are 2 people in that vehicle, if not 3, with someone in the back seat. But either way, he sees what he describes as an Italian guy, a Mexican guy, or a white guy creeping up behind Nicole wearing all dark clothing. So I started thinking to myself, what are the chances that these 2 different Toms see 2 different Italian-looking dudes at Nicole's condo within that 1 hour's time period? And if that guy was just an innocent bystander, a neighbor or a friend or somebody, why he never came forward, right? If he was just an innocent guy there, So we start thinking maybe that's Joey. Okay. And then when we got to talking to Louie and we got to digging into all this stuff with Sammy, his other little brother, it all starts to weave together. And it starts to become apparent that Joey Ippolito had a lot of information about this case. Later on, after the case is ongoing, Joey Ippolito's caught. Because remember, He's a fugitive from justice at the time of the murders. He had escaped prison. He gets caught. He forms a relationship with the FBI and the DEA, at which point, according to the FBI and the DEA, he starts giving them information about the murders in Brentwood. And that information includes evidence that was located and found at Rockingham upon this information making it to Marcia Clark and Chris Darden. So whatever information that he had that he gave to the FBI, that information made it to the prosecution team, and they used that information to gather more evidence against Simpson.
So now,
go ahead. Sorry.
Is the theory that Joey did it himself, or
I don't know.
that
I don't
somebody
think so.
else did it? Who? I guess my question is, who was there? Joey, obviously, according to the theory.
Yeah.
But who else was there?
OJ and AC.
So there are three.
So far. There's always been this talk of a mystery merc. Okay. But I just don't know the merc being a mercenary. We don't know. We don't know who that could have been, or if it could have been anybody
Well, the
at
theory
all.
was Cookie, I think, a while ago, but
Or
you're
somebody,
off of that?
yeah, or somebody who worked with Cookie, for example. But again, I have failed to definitively make that connection. So using the information that we have now and have learned from actual direct witness testimony, people who were involved in this, I can almost definitively tell you that there's no reason why Joey Ippolito knew so much about this case. It's not like Al Cowlings, his best friend, is calling Joey Ippolito and telling him everything he knows about the murders on the phone, especially not at the time. Okay. And there's only a very short window where Joey's not in prison where it would be absurd to get that kind of a phone call from Al Cowlings. So he either gets all of this information about the murders provided to him by Al Cowlings, or he knows from some other source. And
so your theory, just so I'm, keeping up, is it's a mere incident of what happened in Las Vegas. OJ wanted to go grab whatever stuff from her, like it could be possessions, it could be this, it could be that. He got a couple buddies and he said, let's go right over there and get my shit.
Right.
Same way he did in Vegas with his trophies.
You keep in mind, Faye Resnick earlier in the week, was sent to a drug rehab. And as a part of that, it was reported that Nicole had taken her stash. Okay. And so now maybe OJ's aware of that. Okay. And who knows more about cocaine than anybody in this trio? It would be Joey Ippolito, right? And Joey knows something about robbing people too, right? We've established this. This is not a guess. This has happened multiple times. And, perhaps it's, hey, let's just go over there and grab this shit and get out. And then when that happens, boom, Ron Goldman shows up. There's a confrontation with Nicole and OJ. He tries to intervene. And according to what these guys are telling us, Al Cowlings was directly responsible for killing one of them. But, Al Cowlings has an alibi that we can't shake out. That alibi being that he was at a party somewhere in Baldwin Hills with 20 people on the same night, and just coincidentally between the hours of 9:30 and 11:30. And when asked about this subject in deposition, he pled the fifth. He also pled the fifth as it pertained to his relationship with Joe Ippolito. He actually asked for immunity and that he would talk about anything that they wanted to know if they could guarantee that he would not be prosecuted for any of the things that I just mentioned. And they wouldn't give him immunity, so he didn't talk about it. So we've been trying to shake out that alibi. We've reached out to Chris Darden, who was the guy who's responsible for prosecuting Al Cowlings, who would know. Pat McKenna, no idea. Detective Tom Lang, no idea. I've looked on every possible place that you could to try to find even one person who has a cool story, by the way. Man, I was with Al Cowlings the night of the murders. You're never going to find one of them. Or at least I haven't. And believe me, I've searched.
So you haven't found any other person who was at the party with them at the time?
Nothing.
Okay. So you have not been able to confirm the alibi?
Right. Nor do we have a record of it anywhere. Where was the party? Who had the party? How did you get to the party? How did you leave the party? None of that stuff. exist anywhere that I can find. I believe that it does exist, potentially, the story anyway, in a file somewhere that maybe one of the lawyers has, or the state of California has in, a cabinet somewhere collecting dust 30 years after the fact.
Have you reached out to Al?
Yes. It did not go well. All right. Al Cowlings yelled at me on the phone. And, to be honest with you, I was a little freaked out, right? Because I tried to work my way in with him the way that I do with everyone, which is through someone else. And I had 2 really good ones to get to him. And it didn't matter. Al ain't talking. He's, he basically said, we ain't got no fucking mutual friends. And
to be fair, if he didn't do it, he might be annoyed. So, if you accused me of something,
right?
I'd be yelling as well. Very, very possible. So I do want to.
I don't blame the guy. I don't blame the guy at all. But again, you can't blame me either. I want to know, right? So obviously, I reached out to him with the idea of it would be the biggest documentary of all time if you were in it. You haven't said a word about this in 30 years. We have a different angle, one that may or may not, implicate you. But at least if you get to say something, if anything, I said to him right outright, I was like, you don't even have to talk. I think we would have the biggest documentary of all time if you came in, sat for an interview. I showed you this and you got pissed and walked out. I still think that would be epic. But it didn't matter. He saw the trailer. So I sent him that. And I had a brief conversation with my partner on the line. And Al was not, he took the call, so there's that. And he didn't hang up right away. He did hang up. And then I called him back. And then he hung up on me again a few minutes later. It didn't go well. It was the only experience like that I've had so far. Everyone else has been like, we don't think Joey had anything to do with it necessarily, but we get it. It's a romance, the FBI, the DEA, all these guys, but again, they weren't privy to this information either, or at least a lot of it.
Okay. Well, to wrap things up, what's next? When does this documentary come out and where can people find it?
So we're in the midst of selling it. So what we did was we were located by a major Hollywood production company. And I'm talking about probably the biggest one there is. And they do stuff with Netflix, HBO Max, and with Peacock. And he said that, high probability that this gets sold and funded. And that we did such a good job because his work was very minimal. It was just selling it because we did so much shooting. We had so many audio calls on the record, so much video that it became very easy for him to kind of chop it all together to give the proper sizzle to showcase to Netflix his pitch. And if it gets sold and bought, I don't think it's going to be very long. I think we're going to reshoot some of the stuff that we did. And at that point, like I said, I could see it on any one of those 3 that I just mentioned. He seemed very bullish on Netflix or Peacock. And we don't know necessarily what it's going to be titled. We do know that it centers around the accomplice theory and the major people who have been named as possible accomplices. And then we kind of shake them all out as we have done. So,
all right. Well, sounds good. I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I hope you come back at some point and keep me abreast.
Sure. And if you have time, maybe you can roll that last trailer before we sign off.
I was on the balls of my ass.
Is that the $10 million question? It was my twin brother.
He would never lie about that because he always liked to squeal on people. So that's what he did.
He thinks, go fuck yourself. I'll give you nothing. And I don't know what you're talking about anyway.
When he came up to the apartment, told me what he did. I got rid of the knife for him, gave him a change of clothes, and sent him to Chicago to some friends of mine. I got rid of everything.
There's a Mr. Tom Lang.
Tom Lang saw Nicole Brown
behind Miss Simpson.
a man who appeared angry. He didn't know a man standing there with his hands clenched.
Mr. Langley didn't know whether he was angry because his dog was loose or what.
As he stood there on the street, also saw.
Just to get it straight, you're now talking to the guy who said everything. What they put down, what was recorded, is not what I said.
I meant you weren't worried about the kids when you were sucking his dick here in the living room.
Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back.
In the background of the call, you can hear OJ screaming and ranting. Just nobody ever heard what he was talking about. Well, what he was talking about was hiding
Place on numerous
hookers and drug dealers
About
over at her
drugs,
condo because
about
his
hookers.
kids live there.
This time, accused Hollywood Madam Heidi Fleiss back in trouble. This time, bad enough.
I started talking to Heidi Fleiss and she's told me what it was about.
And I'm mad today when I think about it, yes.
You know, some of these call girls need to have people that are enforcers. One of those enforcers' name is Cookie.
Cookie? Cookie.
I don't know who Cookie is.
Okay, is that Cookie is a bad man.
Is that Cookie?
Yeah. This is AC. I have OJ in the car. Okay, where are you? Please, I'm coming up the 5 freeway.
AC, because of Goldman trying to help her, attacked the kid and beat the kid brutally and killed him. They both walked away from it, and that was it.
Charlie, did you help OJ Simpson commit those 2 murders in Brentwood in 1994?